Morning sunlight spilled across the small town of Guthrie, Oklahoma, painting the church in gold. Bells rang softly as people gathered outside, their laughter carried by the cool spring air. Inside, everything looked like a scene torn from a dream. Ivory ribbons on the pews, rose petals scattered down the aisle, the faint hum of an organ rehearsing the wedding march. For Elena Brooks, today was supposed to be her beginning. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her veil with trembling fingers. "You look perfect," her maid of honor whispered. Perfect. The word clung to her like perfume, sweet but suffocating. Outside, Daniel Carter waited near the altar, tall and calm, the embodiment of small-town charm. He had built a quiet life after returning from his job in Tulsa, a life his mother, Margaret Carter, guarded fiercely. Margaret sat in the front pew, spine straight as a ruler, her face unreadable. Her hands clutched her purse tightly, the leather creaking under the pressure. When guests greeted her, she smiled politely, but her eyes never softened. Her gaze kept drifting toward the doors, toward where her soon-to-be daughter-in-law would emerge. Narration, 60%. Elena's journey to this day hadn't been simple. She'd met Daniel only a year ago through a church volunteer event. He'd said she had the kind of smile that made quiet rooms feel alive. He didn't know that smile was carefully constructed, a patch over old wounds. No one did. The town saw her as graceful, kind, and lucky, the woman who'd finally won the heart of Oklahoma's most loyal son. Yet under her calm exterior, Elena's thoughts raced. Her reflection flickered. A white dress, a bouquet, and a pair of eyes that didn't belong to a happy bride, but to someone running from her past. Dialogue, 20%. "You okay?" the makeup artist asked softly. Elena forced a laugh. "Just nerves." "You sure? You look pale." "Yeah," she lied. "I just didn't sleep much." Her smile faltered when the church doors creaked open, revealing Margaret stepping inside the dressing room. The room seemed to shrink. "Elena," Margaret said, her voice smooth but edged with control, "you look radiant." "Thank you," Elena managed. Margaret's eyes swept over her dress, her bouquet, her trembling hands. "My Daniel always wanted a woman with a strong heart. I do hope you have one." The air between them turned heavy. Margaret turned and left before Elena could reply, the faint click of her heels echoing like a warning. Description, 20%. The camera of a nervous videographer panned across the pews. Guests whispered. A beam of sunlight cut through stained glass, painting the aisle in shades of crimson and gold. The hum of anticipation filled the church, but beneath it, something unseen stirred. Elena exhaled shakily and stared at herself once more. The veil shimmered like frost under light. She told herself that everything would be fine, that no one knew who she once was. But then, a draft slipped under the door, carrying a faint sound, paper rustling. Elena frowned. A folded note had been slid under the threshold, its corner brushing against her shoe. In neat handwriting, it read, "Does Daniel know what you did 10 years ago?" Her heart stopped. Outside, the organ began to play. The wedding had begun. The organ's first notes rolled through the church like thunder wrapped in silk. The guests stood, turning toward the heavy wooden doors. Elena froze. Her bouquet slipped slightly in her grip, petals trembling just as much as her hands. The letter still burned in her palm. "Does Daniel know what you did 10 years ago?" She tried to breathe, but every inhale tasted like panic. The maid of honor squeezed her arm. "Ready?" Elena nodded, forcing her lips into something that looked like joy. The double doors opened. Narration, 60%. The aisle stretched before her, long, blinding, sacred. Dozens of eyes watched as she began to walk, one step, then another. Daniel smiled from the altar, love softening every line of his face. To everyone else, Elena looked like a vision of grace. To herself, she looked like a fraud walking toward judgment. Margaret's expression didn't change. Her eyes followed every step Elena took, cold and deliberate, as if studying a specimen. The church filled with murmurs of admiration. No one noticed the bride's fingers clutching her bouquet so tightly that the stems cracked. No one heard her heart pounding louder than the music. Each step drew her closer to Daniel, closer to the moment where pretending would no longer save her. She replayed the message again and again in her mind. Who could have written it? How could they know? Dialogue, 20%. When she reached the altar, Daniel leaned close and whispered, "You look nervous." "I'm just overwhelmed," she replied, her voice trembling like thin glass. He smiled, oblivious. "I told you, everything's perfect." She forced a smile. "Perfect," she echoed. From the front row, Margaret's whisper cut through the quiet. "Perfection never lasts." The priest began his sermon. Words about love, faith, and union filled the air, but Elena barely heard them. Her mind was spinning, 10 years compressed into seconds. She could almost hear the echo of a girl's scream, the crash of breaking glass, the sound of her own voice begging for help that never came. She blinked the memory away. Not now. Not here. The priest asked her to repeat her vows. She stumbled over the first line, her throat tightening. Daniel gently squeezed her hand, thinking it was nerves, not the weight of a ghost pressing against her chest. Description, 20%. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the stained glass windows. The colors flickered across Elena's face, reds, golds, blues, shifting like sins under sunlight. A child in the crowd whispered, "She's so pretty," and someone hushed him. From the back of the church, a shadow lingered by the open door, unseen, waiting. The air felt colder, heavier, as if the building itself knew something terrible was about to unfold. Elena's smile wavered again, small, uncertain, trembling. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, yet she could feel the past tightening its grip, clawing its way back from the dark. The ceremony ended in applause and music, but as she and Daniel walked down the aisle together, her eyes drifted to the crowd. And there, in the last pew, she saw a face she hadn't seen in a decade. The smile finally broke. The face in the last pew vanished as quickly as it appeared, but for Elena, time fractured. The music, the cheers, the soft rain outside, all of it dissolved into the memory she'd fought to bury for a decade. 10 years earlier, she wasn't a bride. She was Lena Brooks, 17, reckless and desperate to leave a suffocating town that always seemed to watch her fail. Narration, 60%. The summer air in 2015 was heavy with humidity and secrets. Lena had spent that night in her friend's borrowed car, a cracked bottle of vodka between them, laughter echoing down the narrow dirt roads. She was wild then. Not cruel, not evil, just young enough to think consequences were for other people. At her side sat Rachel Carter, the town's golden girl, blonde, brilliant, beloved. Rachel had been everything Lena wasn't, and everything she wanted to be. They'd met at a summer job at the diner, bonded by loneliness and late-night confessions. But friendship blurred easily into jealousy, and that night, words turned sharp. "You think you're better than me," Lena had said, gripping the steering wheel as they argued. Rachel had laughed, not cruelly, but carelessly. "I don't think I'm better, Lena. I just am." The headlights caught the curve too late. Tires screeched. A scream tore through the night. And then silence. When Lena crawled out of the wreckage, her knees bloodied, the smell of gasoline burning her throat, Rachel lay motionless beside the road. A single beam from the broken headlight illuminated her face, serene, almost peaceful. Lena ran. She told herself it was fear. She told herself Rachel might still live. But when sirens began to wail in the distance, she kept running. Dialogue, 20%. "Miss Brooks," the sheriff had asked her days later, "you were seen near the crash site. Do you know anything?" She had swallowed hard, hands trembling. "No, sir, I wasn't there." "Yeah, sure." "Yes." The lie rolled too easily from her tongue. Weeks passed. The police called it an accident. The car had lost control. No other passengers confirmed. Rachel Carter's mother, Margaret, collapsed at the funeral, clutching her daughter's picture to her chest. Lena watched from behind the oak trees, face hidden, heart hammering. She whispered a promise only the wind could hear. "I'll disappear. You'll never have to see me again." That same night, she left Guthrie. She cut her hair, changed her name, moved states away, and began rebuilding her life from the ashes of someone else's death. But the guilt never truly left. It followed her. In every mirror, every sleepless night, every glance of light that reminded her of flashing headlights on a lonely road. Description: 20%. The flashback blurred with the present. Red and blue police lights fading into the warm glow of the wedding candles. The echo of sirens dissolved into the applause of guests. The smell of gasoline turned into the scent of roses on her bouquet. Elena blinked, her fingers tightening around Daniel's hand. He looked down at her, smiling, unaware that the ghost of his sister had just walked between them. The camera panned across the church, capturing the two of them smiling, framed in stained glass. To everyone else, it looked like love. To Elena, it felt like punishment. Inside her chest, her heartbeat whispered the same truth she'd buried for 10 years. Rachel Carter was dead because of her, and now Elena was married to Rachel's brother. As the photographer called for the wedding party to gather, Margaret's gaze met hers across the aisle. Steady, knowing, merciless. Elena froze. Somewhere deep inside, she understood. Margaret had always known. The applause faded as the wedding procession moved from the altar to the reception hall, but Elena barely heard a sound. Margaret's stare had followed her down every step of that aisle, a quiet accusation wrapped in polite smiles. The truth pulsed behind Elena's eyes like a bruise she couldn't hide. Narration: 60%. It was supposed to be over. 10 years of silence, 10 years of pretending. She had built a new life from lies and white dresses, the kind that looked pure, even when soaked in guilt. But the past had found her again, dressed in pearls and sitting in the front pew. Guests clinked glasses, photographers laughed, and music filled the air. Daniel, radiant with love, couldn't stop looking at her. To him, this day was joy incarnate, the promise of forever. To Elena, it was a slow unmasking. She told herself Margaret might not truly know. Maybe the note was just a coincidence, a cruel trick from fate. But the way the older woman's eyes had lingered, calm and deliberate, made denial impossible. Margaret Carter had been a mother once. Now she was something else. Grief hardened into intent. Elena sat beside Daniel at the reception table, smiling through flashes of cameras. The gold band on her finger felt like a shackle. Every toast, every compliment about their perfect love sliced her a little deeper. Dialogue: 20%. Daniel leaned close, whispering, "You're quiet. You okay?" She forced a smile. "Just tired. Long morning." He kissed her temple. "You made it beautiful, Ellie. Mom even cried." Her pulse spiked. "She did?" "Yeah," he said, laughing softly. "Guess we're really a family now." Family. The word landed like a curse. Across the room, Margaret raised her glass to her new daughter-in-law. Their eyes met. A slow, venomous acknowledgement. Elena's throat tightened. When Daniel turned to greet guests, Margaret approached, her perfume, lavender and tea, alk, hit before her words did. "Beautiful ceremony," she murmured. Elena nodded. "Thank you." "You know, when my daughter was your age," Margaret continued, voice low but sharp, she had the same laugh, the same spark. Elena froze. "Your daughter?" "Yes," Margaret said, eyes gleaming. "Rachel." A beat of silence, then a smile, soft, eerie, knowing. "Enjoy the honeymoon, dear. Life's short." Description: 20%. Outside the banquet hall, the sky darkened to bruised violet. Wind pressed against the windows, carrying faint rolls of thunder in the distance. The chandeliers flickered, casting fractured light across Elena's pale face. Laughter blurred into echoes, and music distorted into a hum that made her chest tighten. She rose quickly, muttering something about needing air, and slipped down a narrow hallway near the restrooms. Her heels clicked too loudly, betraying her panic. The corridor was dim and silent, only the faint hum of electric bulbs overhead. She leaned against the wall, gasping, her hands shaking so hard the ring glinted erratically in the light. "She knows," she whispered to herself. "Oh God, she knows." Her reflection in a nearby mirror looked almost unrecognizable. The wide, terrified eyes of the girl she thought she'd buried 10 years ago staring back at her. From behind her, footsteps echoed softly in the hallway, slow, measured. Elena turned, her heart racing, and saw Margaret's shadow appear at the end of the corridor. Elena froze, her body rigid as Margaret's silhouette filled the end of the corridor. The hallway was narrow and dim, lined with flickering bulbs and faded portraits of smiling couples long dead. Every step Margaret took forward echoed like a countdown. Narration, 60%. Elena's instinct screamed to run, but her feet wouldn't move. Margaret wasn't shouting, wasn't angry, and that made it worse. There was something chilling about her calmness, like a storm just before the lightning splits the sky. "Didn't mean to scare you," Margaret said, her voice smooth as silk but sharp underneath. "I just wanted a word." Elena swallowed, forcing herself to breathe. The hallway smelled faintly of flowers and cleaning chemicals. Too clean, too artificial. Margaret stopped a few feet away, her purse clutched to her chest like a sacred thing. For a moment, neither spoke. The tension stretched between them, heavy enough to crush sound. "You looked lovely today," Margaret said finally. "Daniel's lucky." "Thank you," Elena managed, her voice barely a whisper. Margaret's smile flickered. "You remind me so much of my daughter." The words stabbed through the air. Elena's stomach twisted. "Rachel?" she asked, pretending to sound casual, though her pulse thudded in her ears. "Yes," Margaret said softly. "You even tilt your head the same way when you're nervous. She used to do that. Especially the night she—" Her voice caught. "The night she didn't come home." Elena felt the world tilt. Every wall, every light seemed to lean toward her. I'm sorry for your loss," she said. The rehearsed line she'd repeated 100 times over the years, always to herself, never aloud. Margaret's eyes glistened, not with grief, but with clarity. "Funny thing about loss," she said. "It doesn't disappear, it waits. It learns your scent, and when it finds you again, it never lets go." Dialogue, 20%. Elena stepped back. "I don't know what you mean." "Oh, I think you do," Margaret murmured. Margaret, please, if this is about something—" "Something?" Margaret's tone sharpened. "My daughter's death isn't something, dear. It's everything." The purse in her hand shifted. The metal clasp clicked open, a soft but terrifying sound. Elena's breath caught as she saw what was inside. Not a weapon, not yet. Just a faded photograph. Rachel Carter, smiling in a cap and gown, sunlight in her hair. She had her whole life ahead of her, Margaret whispered. A scholarship, a fiancé, a mother who adored her. And then one night, she met a girl named Lena Brooks. Elena's blood ran cold. "She died that night," Margaret continued, her voice trembling now. "Her body was found alone. No witnesses, no justice." She looked up, eyes glinting like shards of glass. "Until now." Elena backed up, hand pressed to her chest. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Margaret cut in. "You think changing your name made you clean, but you can't marry your way out of what you did." Description, 20%. Lightning flashed outside the stained glass windows, painting the corridor in violent colors. Red, blue, gold. The sound of thunder rolled through the building, drowning out Elena's gasp. Margaret stepped closer, her face illuminated for a split second. Tears streaked through her makeup, but her expression was unyielding. The picture of her daughter trembled in her hands, corners frayed from years of being touched. Elena's back hit the wall. Somewhere down the hallway, muffled music and laughter continued. A world still celebrating love while this one sank into dread. Margaret slipped the photo back into her purse and whispered, "I prayed for years to meet the person responsible. I just never thought she'd wear white." Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, heels echoing down the hall like gunshots. Elena stood frozen, her breath uneven, the words replaying in her mind until they blurred into one unbearable truth. She knows. A bridesmaid appeared moments later, startled by Elena's pale face. "Hey, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Elena forced a weak smile, her voice hollow. "I think I have." As the bridesmaid led her back toward the celebration, the camera of the wedding videographer caught something fleeting. Margaret in the background, standing by a window, murmuring to herself, her hands still gripping that purse. Inside it, hidden beneath the photograph, something metal glinted under the dim light. The church bells had never sounded so cruel. Their echoes rolled through the small Oklahoma chapel like thunder that refused to fade. For a moment, no one understood what had happened. The scream, raw, high, unearthly, still hung in the air when Claire stumbled backward, her white veil catching on the pew's edge. Blood dotted the silk, a crimson bloom spreading fast. Moments earlier, she had been standing at the altar, trembling only from nerves, not from fear. Daniel had just taken her hand, whispering something soft, something that might have been forever. She had smiled, even though her heart felt heavy from the secret that had followed her for 10 years. Then came the sound, a single sharp crack that didn't belong in a church, a gunshot. Gasps filled the pews. The flower girl dropped her petals. The pastor froze mid-blessing, and Daniel fell first. He hit the floor hard, eyes open, confusion twisting into shock. The red spreading across his chest was almost the same shade as the roses lining the aisle. For a split second, Claire couldn't breathe. She reached for him, voice trembling. "Daniel, no, please." Another sound, this one heavier, slower, heels clicking down the aisle. Every head turned. The woman from the hallway now stood in full view. Her hand was steady, the small revolver gleaming beneath the golden light from the stained glass window. Smoke curled from its barrel. "Claire," she said, her voice breaking the silence like a confession, "you don't deserve to wear white." The congregation gasped. The name on everyone's lips soon followed. Marion, Daniel's mother. Claire froze, veil trembling in her hands. "Mrs. Hayes, please, what are you doing?" Marion's face was pale, but her eyes burned with something ancient and personal. "You think I wouldn't recognize you?" she whispered. 10 years ago, you ruined a family. You ruined my family. The wapiuomi ami hutopua. Ord struck like a second bullet. Claire's knees buckled as memory came rushing back. Flashes of a dusty road, a car accident, a man she never saw again. She'd buried that moment deep, under a different name, a different life. Now it had found her. The veil slipped from her head, streaked with Daniel's blood. The white turned scarlet in seconds. People screamed. Someone yelled for help. A man tried to rush forward, but Marion pointed the gun again, hand trembling but her aim unwavering. "Stay back," she cried. "You don't know what she did. None of you know who she really is." Claire's sobs filled the silence. "Please, please, I never meant for anyone to get hurt. It was an accident." Marion's face twisted. "Accident?" Her voice cracked into something feral. "You left him there to die, my son's father, 10 years ago, and now you think you can take what's left of him?" The crowd was chaos now, phones out, whispers rising like a storm. Claire tried to crawl to Daniel, her white dress dragging in his blood. His eyes fluttered, searching for her, lips barely moving. "Run," he tried to say, but his voice failed him. Marion's hands shook. For a moment, she seemed caught between fury and grief, between vengeance and collapse. Tears streaked down her face. The gun wavered. Then a second shot rang out. Screams tore through the chapel as glass shattered from the stained window. Pigeons burst from the roof. Claire dropped beside Daniel, clutching her side, breath catching as warmth spread through her gown. The veil, now fully red, slipped from her hand and fell onto the altar steps like an offering. Marion stared at what she'd done, her face pale, her mouth trembling. The gun clattered to the floor. "I only wanted him to know," she whispered, "what she took from us." Outside, sirens began to wail in the distance. The bells still tolled, indifferent. Claire's fingers ached weakly for Daniel's hand, her voice fading into a broken whisper. "I tried to tell you. Before today." His eyes fluttered once, then closed. And as the first police officer pushed through the chapel doors, the bride in blood and the groom who never finished his vow lay side by side beneath the cross, united at last in silence. From the back of the church, unseen by anyone, another woman slipped quietly out the side door, her eyes cold, her lips curved into something that looked like satisfaction. The truth, it seemed, was not yet finished with them. Silence has a sound. It hums in the walls, echoes through the empty air, and fills the gaps where screams once lived. The gunshots had stopped, but their ghosts still rang inside the chapel. Every breath, every heartbeat seemed too loud. The congregation had scattered. Some fainted. Others ran into the rain outside, their shoes echoing on the stone steps. The once beautiful church now looked like a battlefield. The white aisle, where petals once lay, was streaked in red. The altar candles flickered weakly, bending in the wind from the open door. Claire's body lay still beside Daniel's, her fingers curled around his as though holding on to the last piece of life left between them. The veil, soaked and crumpled, had settled in the center of the aisle like a flag of surrender. Marion Hayes stood frozen near the altar. Her gun rested at her feet. Her hands, streaked with blood and trembling, hovered mid-air as if still unsure whether they had truly pulled the trigger. She couldn't hear anything. No voices, no sirens, not even her own sobs, just the heavy, suffocating silence. When the police finally entered, the sound of their boots on the chapel floor snapped her back to reality. "Ma'am, put your hands where we can see them," one of them ordered. His voice cut through the silence like glass breaking. Marion didn't move. She just stared at Daniel's body. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. "Ma'am!" the officer shouted again, this time louder. She slowly turned her head toward him, eyes wide and distant. "He wasn't supposed to die," she whispered. The officer hesitated, then lowered his weapon slightly. "Who wasn't supposed to die?" Marion blinked, tears spilling freely now. "My son. I only wanted her to remember, to feel what I felt." Two paramedics rushed forward, kneeling beside the bride and groom. "No pulse," one said softly. "Time of death, 11:40 cons. 7. The words hit Marion harder than the gun's recoil. She staggered back, hand pressed to her chest, her breathing ragged. The silence inside her grew louder. Outside, rain began to pour, hammering against the stained glass windows. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the crucifix above the altar. For a brief moment, it looked like the figure of Christ was weeping. Detective Aaron Blake entered through the side door, soaked and tense. His sharp eyes swept across the carnage before settling on Marion. "Get her out of here," he said quietly to his team. "We'll handle the rest." As they led Marion away, she glanced over her shoulder one last time. Her gaze lingered on the blood-soaked veil. "Tell him," she whispered to no one in particular. "Tell him I tried to save him." The detective watched her go, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to the paramedics. "I want this place sealed off. Nobody leaves. Nobody touches anything." He crouched near the altar, studying the scene. 2 bodies, 1 weapon, and a mystery far older than the gunpowder still hanging in the air. Something didn't fit. If Marion's motive was revenge for something that happened 10 years ago, why strike now? Why at her own son's wedding? And who was the woman seen leaving the chapel's side door moments after the shooting, caught only as a blur on one witness's phone? Blake's mind raced. He looked down at the bride's hand, blood-stained but still wearing her ring. On her other wrist, beneath the lace, was a faint scar, half hidden, a mark that told a story. He pulled out his notepad, scribbling a few words. 10 years ago, car accident, unknown survivor. As he stood, a draft swept through the chapel. The candles flickered again, one by one going out, until the only light came from the flashing red and blue outside. In that pulsing glow, the crucifix shadow stretched across. As the floor, long, distorted, and falling directly over Daniel's body. Detective Blake exhaled slowly. "This isn't over," he murmured. From the doorway, one of the officers called out, "Sir, you might want to see this!" Blake turned. Outside, near the church gates, a small car sat idling in the rain. Inside it was a photograph, water-damaged, old, but still clear enough to see. A teenage girl, smiling beside a young man who looked strikingly like Daniel. And standing behind them, Marion Hayes. Blake's grip on the photo tightened, his pulse quickened. The silence had ended, the past was beginning to speak. Rain sheeted across the police station windows, drumming like restless fingers on glass. The world outside looked blurred, as if even the night itself didn't want to see what had just happened inside that church. Detective Aaron Blake sat across from Marion Hayes in the interrogation room. The fluorescent light above them buzzed faintly, casting long shadows across her pale face. Her wedding guest dress was wrinkled and speckled with drying blood. She hadn't spoken since she'd been brought in, until now. "I told him," she whispered finally, eyes fixed on the metal table. "I told Daniel that the past never stays buried." Blake's pen stilled. "You're saying Daniel knew?" Marion shook her head slowly. "Not everything, just that she'd lied to him." "She, meaning Claire?" A nod, then silence again, except for the soft hum of the air vent. Blake leaned forward. "Marion, I need to understand what happened 10 years ago. You keep saying she ruined your family. How?" Her voice trembled but held a strange calm. "It started on Highway 43, outside Tulsa. My husband was driving home late one night. There was a storm, just like tonight. They said a young woman's car crossed the center line. He swerved to avoid her, hit a guardrail, and went over the embankment. Her gaze flicked upward, meeting Blake's eyes for the first time. She never stopped, never called for help, left him to die while she disappeared into another life." Blake wrote quickly. "And you're certain that woman was Claire Mendoza?" Marion's laugh was hollow, broken. "Back then she wasn't Claire. She was using her real name, Clara Reyes. But people forget, Detective. Records get lost. Faces change. I didn't." She closed her eyes, the memory cutting through the silence like glass. "I found her picture in a local newspaper last year. Engagement announcement. Daniel Hayes and Claire Mendoza. My son marrying the woman who killed his father." Blake's pulse quickened. "Why didn't you go to the police then?" "I tried. No one listened. The case was too old, evidence gone. They told me to let it go. But I couldn't. Not when I saw her smile next to him, pretending to be someone new. So I went to the wedding. I thought maybe I'd confront her, make her confess. But when I saw them together, laughing under that altar," her voice cracked, "I lost myself." Blake studied her. "You say you didn't mean to kill Daniel." "I didn't." Tears streaked down her cheeks. "I only meant to scare her, to make her remember." But he stepped in front of her, like he always did, protecting her from everything, even the truth. Her words hung heavy in the air. Blake stood and stepped toward the small observation window. Through the reflection, he saw Marion trembling, her hands clasped tightly as if she were still praying. Behind the one-way glass, Officer Lena Cruz watched silently. "You believe her?" she asked when Blake stepped out. "I believe part of her," he said, "but there's still one piece missing, the woman the witness saw leaving the church. Marion swears she doesn't know her. If that's true, someone else knows what happened 10 years ago, and maybe what Claire was running from." Lena frowned. "You think Claire was hiding something bigger than the accident?" Blake nodded. "Every secret starts with one lie, but this one feels deeper." He turned back to the interrogation room, watching Marion through the glass. She was humming softly now, an old lullaby, the kind mothers sing to sleeping children. For the first time, Blake noticed the small crucifix around her neck. Its chain was broken, half mended with a thin thread. Something about it unsettled him. He opened the evidence file on the table. Inside was the water-damaged photo recovered from the car at the church gates, the teenage girl, the boy, and Marion standing behind them. But on the back of the photo, faint ink lines had emerged as the paper dried, a date and a name scribbled beneath it. Reyes Farm, June 15, 2015. Blake's mind connected the dots. The accident on Highway 43, a rural property nearby owned by a family named Reyes. "Get me everything you can on that farm," he ordered. "Ownership, residents, accidents, deaths, whatever you find." Lena nodded and hurried off. Blake exhaled, staring once more at Marion, who now sat in perfect stillness. The storm outside roared louder, but in the interrogation room, silence reigned again, thick, deliberate, and waiting. Somewhere out there, the truth still breathed, and it wasn't finished telling its story. The rain hadn't stopped. It beat against the windows of the precinct like a pulse, relentless and rhythmic, as if marking the seconds left before everything unraveled. Detective Aaron Blake sat in his office, files scattered across the desk, crime scene photos, transcripts, and the faded image of 3 faces smiling at a farm long forgotten. The name Reyes Farm, circled in red ink, stared back at him like a wound that refused to close. A knock on the door broke the silence. Officer Lena Cruz stepped in, holding a file. "We found something," she said, her tone cautious. Ownership records show the Reyes family sold their farm 9 years ago, shortly after a fatal crash nearby. The driver was identified as Luis Hayes, victim, survived by his wife, Marion, and son, Daniel. Blake's eyes narrowed. And the other driver? Lena hesitated. Unidentified female, vehicle registered under a fake name. But there's more. The VIN matches a car abandoned a week later in Tulsa. The registration was linked to Clara Reyes. The detective leaned back slowly. The storm outside cracked with thunder. "So it's true," he murmured. "She killed him and ran." "Not just ran," Lena added, flipping open another file. "She changed everything, her name, her records, even her face. She filed a missing persons report on herself a year later, claimed to be her own sister." Blake exhaled sharply, his pulse quickening. She reinvented her entire life, and Marion found her. Before Lena could respond, an officer appeared at the door. "Detective, we have something you'll want to see. Marion Hayes. She's asking to make a full statement. Says it's time to confess." In the interrogation room, the light flickered again. Marion sat still, her wrists free now, her face washed and her hair pulled back. She looked calm, eerily calm. Blake entered quietly, setting the recorder on the table. "You said you want to talk." Marion nodded. "Yes, but not for me." She took a deep breath. "For him. For Daniel." He pressed the record button. "You're ready?" Her eyes lifted to his. "I've been ready for 10 years. Marion's voice began soft, trembling like the edges of a memory long buried. "I didn't kill her for revenge," she said. "At least, not at first. When I found her picture in that newspaper, I thought maybe God was giving me a second chance to make her see what she'd done. I went to her, not as an enemy, but as a mother. I wanted to hear her say it, to hear the truth from her lips." She paused, her fingers tracing invisible lines on the table. "She didn't recognize me, or pretended not to. When I told her who I was, she froze. She said she was sorry, that she'd tried to call for help that night, but the phone lines were dead and she panicked. She said she wanted to go back, but she was too scared. I wanted to believe her, detective. God knows I did." Blake's pen hovered over his notebook. "But you didn't." Marion's jaw clenched. Because she smiled when she said it, that same smile she wore in her wedding dress, the same one she gave Daniel when he looked at her like she was the world. It wasn't guilt. It was relief. She'd gotten away with it. Her eyes glistened. "I told her I would never let her marry my son. She begged me to stay quiet, for Daniel's sake, and I almost did. But when the wedding came, when I saw her walking down the aisle in white, I saw my husband's blood instead of flowers. I saw the life she stole." Her voice cracked, the calm breaking at last. "I didn't mean to shoot him, detective. I swear I didn't. I only meant to scare her. But when Daniel stepped in front of her, everything went red." Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered, "I killed my son to avenge my husband. Tell me what justice looks like for that." Blake sat silently, the age of the light filling the room. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, from the hallway, Lena's voice broke through the intercom. "Detective, we've got something. Found a security feed from the church. There's a third person, a woman matching the description the witness gave. She was there just before the shots were fired." Blake turned back to Marion. "Do you know who she is?" Marion's face drained of color, her lips parted, trembling. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Not her. Not again." Blake frowned. "Who, Marion?" But she didn't answer. She simply leaned back, whispering something over and over, too soft to catch. Through the one-way glass, Blake watched as the detective's reflection merged with hers, two ghosts trapped by the same truth. Outside, thunder cracked again, louder this time. The storm wasn't passing, it was only beginning. The morning after the confession, the world outside the precinct looked washed clean. The storm had finally passed, but the sky remained gray. The kind of gray that carried no peace, only exhaustion. Detective Aaron Blake sat in his car outside the morgue, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes heavy from a sleepless night. He had listened to Marion Hayes' confession 5 times. Every word, every pause, every tremor, and yet something about it still didn't sit right. She had confessed to the shooting, yes, but not to the full truth. The image of her face when he'd asked about the other woman haunted him. That look. Not confusion, but recognition buried under fear. Blake stepped out into the cool air, the scent of wet asphalt and lilies from the nearby cemetery mixing in the breeze. Inside the morgue, the air was colder, sharper. Claire and Daniel Hayes lay in adjacent drawers, side by side, the bride and groom bound in death the way they hadn't been in life. The coroner, Dr. Finch, glanced up from his clipboard. "Detective, autopsy's done. You'll want to hear this." Blake nodded. "Tell me." Daniel Hayes died instantly from a single shot to the chest. No surprises there. But Claire... Finch hesitated, lowering his voice. "Her wound wasn't fatal at first. The bullet grazed her ribcage. She bled out slowly." Blake frowned. "Meaning she could have been saved?" "Easily, if she'd gotten help within 20 minutes. Blake's jaw tightened. "But Marion said she called 911. "She didn't," Finch said flatly. "No call from her phone until over an hour later. By then, it was too late." The detective stared at the covered body. "So she let her die." Finch shrugged. "Looks that way. But here's the strange part. We found traces of something under Claire's nails. Fabric, a thread, dark blue. Doesn't match the groom's suit or Marion's dress." Blake's pulse quickened. "Oh, the third person," he muttered. Outside, church bells tolled faintly in the distance, a cruel echo of the wedding that had turned into a funeral. Back at the precinct, Marion sat alone in her cell, staring at the small crucifix that hung from the wall. The air was still. Her hands trembled slightly as she whispered a prayer under her breath, her lips barely moving. The door opened. Blake stepped in. "Marion, we need to talk." She didn't look up. "You already have my confession." "There's more to confess," he said softly. "The woman who left the chapel. We found a partial fingerprint on the side door handle. It's not yours. It's not Claire's either." Marion's shoulders stiffened. Blake continued, his tone careful. "Her name was Rosa Reyes. She died 3 years ago. Car accident. But we found something in the records. She was Claire's sister." At that, Marion looked up, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible. Rosa's dead." Blake stepped closer. "Then tell me why her prints are on that door." Marion's face drained of color. She came to me once," she said, voice trembling. "A few months before the wedding. She said she wanted to talk about Claire, said there were things I didn't know. She told me to stop the marriage before it was too late." "What things?" Marion's eyes glistened. That Daniel wasn't Claire's first love, or her first secret. The silence that followed felt heavy, almost alive. "She said Claire married him out of guilt," Marion whispered. "That Daniel wasn't just the man she loved. He was the son of the man she killed." Blake froze. "You're saying she knew?" "Yes," Marion said. "She knew the whole time. That's why she wanted to marry him, to make it right somehow. But Rosa said it was never love. It was punishment." The detective felt the room close in around him. The pieces fit. Too perfectly. Too painfully. Claire Mendoza had married the man whose father she'd killed. The wedding was never about a new beginning. It was an attempt at redemption gone wrong. Marion looked up at him, eyes hollow. "You think I'm a monster, detective?" But she was ready to live a lie for the rest of her life. "At least I ended it." Blake's voice softened. "You ended everything, Marion." She looked away, whispering the words like a vow. "Till death do us part." As Blake left the cell, rain began again. Soft, steady, relentless. He didn't notice the file waiting on his desk. A folder marked Rosa Reyes, unresolved death. Inside, a single photograph showed Rosa standing beside a man who looked strikingly familiar. Not Daniel, not Luis. Someone else entirely. The truth, it seemed, had one more secret to tell. The rain had turned the city into a muted watercolor, gray skies melting into darker streets, puddles catching reflections of light that didn't belong to Joy anymore. Detective Aaron Blake drove through the quiet morning, the windshield wipers rhythmically beating against memories he couldn't silence. Marion's words from the night before clung to him like smoke. She married him out of guilt. The idea was absurd. And yet, the more he replayed everything, the more it made sense. The wedding wasn't the beginning of love. It was the end of a secret. He parked in front of St. Bridget's Chapel, the place where everything had begun and ended. The police tape still fluttered in the damp wind, the faint scent of roses clinging to the air like a ghost refusing to leave. Inside, the chapel was silent, except for the soft creak of wooden pews as he walked past them. The altar remained frozen in time. Half-melted candles, crushed petals, a blood-stained lace veil resting near the steps. He crouched down, fingertips grazing the fabric. Blood on the veil. The evidence tag had named it, but standing here now, it felt more like an accusation than a clue. "Detective?" a voice called. Blake turned. Officer Kendra Shaw stood in the doorway, holding a box of newly uncovered evidence. "You might want to see this," she said. He motioned for her to set it down. Inside were photos, a burned invitation, and a small, water-damaged envelope addressed to Daniel Hayes. The handwriting was delicate, feminine, practiced, but trembling. He opened it carefully. "Daniel, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't do it. I thought marrying you would make the past go away, but it only made it louder. I've seen your father's face every night since that night. The way he looked at me before the car went over the edge. You deserve the truth. You deserve peace. I never should have let you love me." "Claire." Blake exhaled slowly. The confession wasn't just Marion's, it was Claire's too, but hers came too late. Kendra frowned. "So she did kill his father?" "Looks that way," Blake said. "A hit and run, the same case that went cold in '09. He looked around the chapel again, and for a moment the scene replayed in his mind. The laughter, the music, the vows, all crashing against the inevitability of what came next. That afternoon, Blake visited the Hayes family estate, now eerily quiet, its windows draped in black fabric for mourning. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lilies and decay. He was met by Eleanor Hayes, Daniel's mother. She was a tall woman, her spine unbending despite her grief, her eyes sharp with something deeper than sorrow. "You found what you were looking for?" she asked, her tone calm but edged. Blake studied her. "I think we're close. Did you know Claire before the wedding?" Her lips twitched. A pause, not of surprise, but calculation. "She visited once," she said finally. Polite, soft-spoken. But I saw something in her eyes that day. Guilt. The kind a person wears when the truth has already started to rot inside them. Blake tilted his head. "Did Daniel know?" Eleanor's gaze hardened. "My son was a good man. He believed in forgiveness, maybe too much." He caught the faint tremor in her voice, the kind that hides more than grief. As he turned to leave, she said quietly, "Detective, some sins are meant to be buried. Stop digging, or you'll find more than you want to see." Outside, the storm had returned, thin sheets of rain hissing against the car roof. Blake sat in silence, watching the estate fade in the rearview mirror. Something about Eleanor's tone lingered, not warning, protection. He reached for the old case file in the passenger seat, the one labeled Rosa Reyes, unresolved death. A photo slipped out, Rosa Saint, ending beside Eleanor Hayes. His breath caught. The connection wasn't between the bride and the groom anymore. It was between their mothers. The wedding had been nothing more than the final act in a story that started years earlier, one built on secrets, debts, and bloodlines, tangled beyond forgiveness. The real truth hadn't died with the couple. It was waiting, buried beneath Eleanor's perfect poise.